In recent times, especially in America, Afghanistan has been constantly in the news and in our lives. From causing a synthetic drug epidemic due to the new Taliban government banning opium cultivation, to being the birthplace for some of the most infamous terrorist organizations. And the amount of wars that have been fought here, from civil, international, and revolutionary, is absolutely insane. And with all of this history, you would think it would be difficult to learn about one of the most interesting and impactful countries in the world. However, there is fortunately only one source you'll ever need that will teach you everything you need to know about Afghanistan. It's called Afghanistan, with a hyphen. And they made all the countries into moe anime girls. Afghanistan is a yonkoma style manga that was published online in October 2003 by Chimaking on their own website, running until February 2005. It depicts the history of Central Asia, more specifically Afghanistan, through micro-narratives and anthropomorphized depictions of the countries involved, and accompanied by a memo that gives a more descriptive explanation of the history shown in the comic. And it is quite interesting. I mean, it doesn't do half a bad job of explaining the history. However, you're probably asking, as was I, why the fuck is there a manga that made Osama bin Laden into a cat and America into an angry white girl? Well, I also have that question, and unfortunately, there isn't much information about this manga and its creation. But that's not to say that there is nothing. So I will try my best to tell the story of Afghanistan and analyze some of its elements. And before we start, pretty much all of the information about the critical analysis section of this manga comes from one source, being an actual university research paper published by two mad lads at the University of Amsterdam. How did they even convince their professor to allow them to write a paper on this? And for information regarding the author and the manga, I found this website from another dedicated soul, so credits to them. So I initially came across this manga while making my weird Wikipedia articles video, when it just popped up on the list. And when I looked at the Wikipedia article to get more information for this video, there was only one source, and barely any information on the page. And that singular source is the aforementioned research paper. But that gives barely any information about the author and what they did. So instead, I tried looking up the author's name directly, which led to me finding his mail entry, which has only two stories, the original Afghanistan and part of the sequel, Pakistan. And it has some basic information, such as their birthday, gender, and blood type. At this point, I was so confused because there was practically nothing about this guy, but we knew his blood type for some reason. And funnily enough, I got most of the information about this guy from the fandom manga wiki, probably the only time that fandom has been useful, which led me to all the other sites I could find. So here is the rough story and timeline of this manga and its creator. In October 2003, Chimaking would publish the first chapter of Afghanistan on his own website, along with a bunch of character introductions showing all the different characters in the story. Over the next few months, Chimaking would continue publishing his manga on his site, with most people appreciating its educational value, as it served both as a comedic depiction of the history, while also supplying actual information about the history in a more direct and unbiased way. The manga finished in February of 2005, with the sequel called Pakistan being made shortly thereafter, though only for 4 chapters. This is where the story reportedly reached the height of its popularity on the Japanese internet. So soon after, Chimaking was approached by Sunsai Books, who offered to publish Afghanistan as an actual physical manga, and it was slated to be released on the 22nd of July 2005. However, just before this released, Chimaking's computer was infected with a virus. He had been using a program called Winnie, a file-sharing website similar to Napster used primarily in Japan. However, this virus leaked practically all of Chimaking's personal files and information onto the internet, including his full name, phone number, address, and other information. Along with these, it was discovered that he had been downloading pirated versions of manga and eroge, and as you know, the Japanese do not take lightly to pirating. Funnily enough, Winnie is the culprit of many leaks of classified or sensitive information in the early 2000s, with even f***ing nuclear power plant documents being leaked. And due to the early nature of the Japanese internet, with sites like 2chan, Chimaking was criticized and harassed for this leak, whereas instead of being seen as the victim, he was seen as an idiot who got a virus on his computer. This is why we know his blood type for some reason, because of this leak. However, despite this physical version of Afghanistan still released, though a bit later on the 26th of July. But Chimaking, after the leak, completely withdrew from the internet. He didn't post any updates on his website, not even addressing the leak. He didn't attend a doujin meet and convention called Comic-Con, and soon after, on the 6th of April 2006, his website went down, and we haven't heard anything from him since. He has completely vanished. Well, except for the publication of the physical Pakistan manga, which was published on August 1st, 2008. But apart from that, that's everything we know. It's a very interesting situation here. Main makes a manga that turns Pakistan into an upbeat, energetic anime girl and gets his personal information leaked online, and then completely disappears from the earth. Fantastic. Now, after reading this much, I've decided that was probably more than enough background, because I didn't want to actually go searching for this leak or any of the leaked information. And please, to you watching, please don't go searching for this guy's information. He clearly didn't want to be known publicly, so don't go digging for something that was buried a while ago. With the story of the author out of the way, let's actually look at this manga. And let's start off with the elephant in the room. The personification of the Central Asian countries as cute anime girls. It is definitely a choice that was made, but it actually, according to the two mad lads in Amsterdam, is a really interesting and deep decision that shows how we as people interpret our countries. Usually when we refer to countries, we refer to them using feminine terms, such as how Russia is named the motherland. However, it is more than in name, but in actual conceptual reality. Because when we live in a country, it takes care of us, nurtures us, makes sure we are safe. We grow up with it, the same way a mother would do for their child. And then when it's in danger, it's not the country that protects us, but us that protects it. This is funnily based in reality as well, because usually throughout history, it was typically the men that went and fought the wars while the women stayed home. And as such, most men started relating protecting their countries as protecting their wives and partners. So this is probably one way that countries were thought of as women. And the manga further shows this. The girls are just straight up the country. But the military factions that did a lot of the fighting, such as the Taliban or the Mujahideen, were depicted as men. And they did the actual fighting, while the girls stayed and played. Which the paper argues sort of reinforces gender stereotypes of how women stay and play while men go and fight. Though feel free to come up with your own ideas. In fact, a lot of the aspects of the history were dumbed down to what you could call playground speak. The politics are games to play, international relations are personal friendships, countries are literal houses. Many of the aspects of the story were made easier to understand, and this is both a good and bad thing. First, the good. Making it simple can make it easier to learn and appreciate the history of this area. And since most people don't want to read a textbook, having a manga with cute anime girls makes it much more interesting and digestible. And by depicting the countries as girls, it means that we can relate more emotionally to the story and the history, because we relate a lot more to people and their struggles rather than a whole country, because we can't really grasp the amount of people and things that a country encompasses. So by making them simple anime girls, we can understand the story and history better. However, the downside of this is that it can trivialize or downplay the actual seriousness of the situations depicted. For example, Bin Laden in this story is depicted as a feral cat that invaded Afghanistan's home and stole her sword, saying that Al-Qaeda had stolen Afghanistan's fighting ability. And it makes sense to depict terrorists as feral cats, as they are hard to capture or tame and are completely unpredictable. However, what happens next is the part. 9/11 in this story is depicted as Bin Laden scratching America while she is relaxing. And I probably do not need to explain why showing the largest terrorist attack in history and then an incredibly deadly war that involved many people getting killed as a cat and mouse game is a bit of a bad thing. And by depicting Bin Laden as a cat, it sort of insinuates that he is the good guy, because how could a simple cat do so much damage to a person? A scratch is nothing, it'll heal, it'll be fine. And finally, by making everything so simple, or by depicting these multifaceted situations as playground squabbles, it makes us disengage from what is being depicted. So instead of seeing a massive dangerous war that killed thousands of innocent people, the manga shows the war of terror as America chasing a cat around. Though that's not to say that the story didn't address this, at least. It does say outright what actually happened with more information in the memos on each chapter. They do explain much more in depth when, where, why, and what happened. Does this excuse the previous point? Not entirely, but it shows that the author was at least aware of what he was depicting and about their history of the area. Apart from all that critical analysis, is the manga a good read? Well, from what I saw, yes. It is definitely something you can pick up and knock over in half an hour, and it is quite fun to read. The art isn't anything special, just being the basic early 2000s moe style where everyone has caught stage 9 anime. If you want to go read it, it's both on the Internet Archive and on this other website, which I will provide links to if you want to go read it for yourself. And if you guys want, I can make a second video that goes over the second series as well, though that one will probably be a bit shorter than this one. Also, give the paper by the two Dutchies a read. Honestly, it's surprisingly really in-depth and provides much more information about the critical effect of this story. Though, who am I kidding? You're going to read this to see Bin Laden as a cat.